Hello, I'm David Evans, and I'm going to tell you about this printing press here a little bit. And of course, I ran this press for many years while I was running the print shop in Ulen, and I bought the paper from Milton Ryersgård way back in '74. And so we used the old equipment when I first started out, and then we changed to the offset printing presses and other things, computer use now. But this press printed a lot of auction sale bills on it and other kinds of printing, commercial printing of all kinds. So, and it's called a Chandler and Price press. So you put the form in there and you put the ink on the disc, and these rollers that look like they've seen their better days would pick up the ink and then put the ink on the form, and then you put the paper in here and it would print it, and you take off, you put it in there and you take off while it was running. And so that's kind of how this press would work. And this press, of course, was made back in the 1800s, so they had some pretty good engineering back then. And of course it was used for probably 150 years, that type of printing press. And so that's about all there is to say about this machine right now. And here we have the type case. It's called, these are called California job cases. And they have the metal type made out of lead, and here we just have the ULEN, and of course it's upside down and backwards, so that when it prints, then it comes out upside right and left to right. Forward. So anyway, and these cases they come in all kinds of different sizes of type, and you assemble them in a composing stick and put it all together in a form, and that's what goes on the press to print, like cards and whatever, letterheads and things like that. So that's what this would be used for. Here we have the first edition of the Ulen Union that was published back in October 23, 1896. And the editors were Hochtwit and Todd. And so they started the paper at that time, and they sold the paper 10 months later to O.E. Ryersgård. That'd be Milton Ryersgård's father then. And he was just a very young man at the time. He just graduated from Concordia College, and he bought the paper that was already started up by these two fellows. And it was in the Ryersgård family for 77 years after that, until I bought it in 1974 from Milton then. And so the paper, this is very, very, very old and brittle, but it's nice to have all of these volumes. And here we have all the volumes from that time that have been printed, and by law we have to send these into the State Historical Society. And so and then at the same time we're put into a book. So all of these volumes are complete, and they go way back, and we printed them on a big press. There was a two-cycle press that you'd feed it, and then it would run a couple times, and then you'd feed another one in there, and of course after that you had to fold them. And when I first started in '74, we would run ballots off on there, because I switched over to offset printing right away. So I didn't really print the Ulen Union on that press. Milton started that about a year before I took over. And but these papers, all of them were printed on that big press. And the photography, of course, has changed appreciably over the years. Way back when, they used blocks, linoleum blocks that they would make etchings on, and they'd mount them on wood. Well, from that time, these are the etchings that were done in those days, way back then. But then when I first took over, of course, then we would have zinc plates made. We'd send them into the Fargo Forum, and they would make a zinc plate, and then we'd mount them on a base and put them in the paper to print it. Well, and then we, of course, switched over to going into the darkroom and making, I took, thousands of pictures over the 26 years that I was in business, and spent a lot of time in the darkroom making pictures. And these were all then made into a negative, and the negatives were then, you burn a plate from that. Well, nowadays, everything is done digitally, so we use the computers, and we use digital cameras and take pictures and send them electronically here and there, and eventually to the press where they print the paper. Way back when they printed this paper, they would set the type of the local news up, and it was set on a linotype machine, which was just like a typewriter, only everything was in a different place than the typewriters. And so it would cast these slugs that would have a line of type. That's why it's called a line of type. And so, but on one side of the sheet, we'd print the local news was printed. On the other side of the sheet was already pre-printed in New York City. And so the paper was sent here with half of it already printed with national and world news. And then the types that they would set here would be printed on the other side. And of course, type now, and when I started, it was first linotype machine, and then very quickly, before the first year was up, I bought a photo typesetting machine called a compositor, and that thing would do the same thing as a linotype machine. Only we had to go in a darkroom and develop it and cut it apart and paste it up. Well, now, with the computers, we're able to type it all on the computer, and it's all formatted to the column widths and everything else, so things have changed considerably on how the type was set. Here at the Viking Sword Museum, we have all kinds of publications that are on display, and going from the Fargo Forum, Minneapolis Tribune, and the Minneapolis Morning Tribune, the Forum again, and here we have the Century of News, which was the publication that we put out here in Ulen for the centennial. And I just want to say a few things about that required a lot of work. I think we had, I don't know how many pages it is, but it's like 40, 50 some pages or whatever it is. And it's filled with all kinds of pictures and articles and things that were gathered for that. But I remember doing the work on that along with Carol and others, and it was really a huge undertaking, but it recorded a lot of history for our first century. Here we have a number of typewriters that are on display here at the museum. This one here dates back to 1918. It's an Oliver typewriter that was donated by Wilfred Anderson. And then we have a Monarch here donated by Conrad Rieger. And another one here, Doyle Fievig, one that Oris Fievig had. And here's one that Joe Hendrickson donated to the museum. We've got some cameras and other items of interest here that are photography related and printing. This camera here is donated by Alan Evans. His mother says on there Melba Lee, that was her maiden name, and so that belonged to her, and so he donated that here, and I think this other camera as well. And we have a number of other items here, rubber stamps and a light, and a fountain pen, an old fountain pen here that was donated by Dwayne and Kathy Fugly. And Art Green has this table model stereo optic and view cards, this three-dimensional viewing machine there.
Here's a poster of the first turkey barbecue here at Ulen. I see all you can eat, $1, 6th grade and under 50 cents. And here's the one from August 18th, 2007.